Hey guys, Mason Marangella here, the Rig Doctor. Today I'm taking you through another one of our new pedal boards, one of our Tour Elite size pedal boards, 29 inches by 15, the biggest size that we make. Now remember, this doesn't sound that big, but the reality is with our hinged riser systems, it basically doubles the surface area of your pedal boards. In this case, in this board, it's got some of the coolest stuff out there. It's got an old KLON, it's got an old tube screamer, it's got an old Memory Man. It has some great boutique classics that a lot of people love, like the Vibro made by Shin-ei, which is super cool. But then it also has some sort of weird oddball stuff on there, like a Boss RV5, which is kind of a cult classic of a lot of CCM and worship players. Guys like James Duke have been using that for years. It's got some pretty cool stuff on there. So we're gonna check that out. I'm sort of like mid-build, maybe 3/4 of the way through the build. It's a cool rig because it's not using some of the usual things that we would see with these type of effects. There's actually no MIDI on this rig at all. It's being used with true bypass loopers that are from one control, and we just use those to kind of put in all of the basic pedals, and then we've used a couple of pedals outside of that. They're gonna kind of be things that are switched in and out on the fly that don't need to be inside the true bypass looper. So let's go to workshop, let's check that out. My name is Mason Marangella. I build rigs for the industry's top professionals. Now, I'm teaching guitarists how to build rigs like the pros, with DIY tips, easy mods, and all the tricks of the trade. I am the Rig Doctor. Now, I'm a little messy here because I've been working on my rack, which we'll have a separate video of that we'll talk about later. But this is coming together real nice. So we got a tuner here that's connected to the HILTON. We're kind of starting out of order, but just kind of spatially on the board. As I said before, we got the old Memory Man. That one's looking good. Got a timeline, BLUESKY, and of course the classic Boss RV5. Now the other cool thing we should mention is I connected these two Zumas together because you always want to make sure that you're powered appropriately. But I only wanted to make it so you plug into one. So you notice I have an IEC hole plug here, but this one is open because when you plug into this guy, if this isn't closed, this is active. So if you touch that, you're going to get shocked. So I'll link these so you can get those IEC plugs if you want to do this, and then they're kind of connected in between. You can't really see it here, but I'm basically leading 3 wires from this IEC. They connect over to this IEC, so either one would work, but I just decided to plug that one. Let's open up the hood. We got the Vibro, which is a great little small Univi pedal. We've of course got the KLON. Now this is a cool one we don't see too often anymore, but it's a great compressor. Pinegre compressor, Bjorn Yule joint. Got the ZVEX SHO, POG. This is a good one we don't see a lot of love for. The Cusack, excellent tremolo. D.A.M tone bender. I did throw a little mod on there so that you can turn on and off the battery. That way you just don't use it up because we're leaving it always plugged in. So when you're in the down position, the battery's off, and you can easily change it by removing that battery door. I left plenty of room here between the volume pedal so you can get to that. We got the old tube screamer here, and we're a good chunk of the way done, but I'll show you the rest of this thing as I kind of go through and build it so you can kind of see it time-lapsed, and let's see how it comes together. Alright, so we're all done, and let's see what we got here. So to start, we got our one control true bypass loopers. These are just mechanical true bypass loopers, very simple but effective in organizing your pedals, making sure that you get your signal path as abbreviated as possible as direct to the amplifier when nothing's on. Now we don't have any sort of input buffer going on here because the very first thing in the chain is the tone bender made by D.A.M pedals. So can't have that going on, so no input buffer, but presumably we're always going to have at least one pedal on at the beginning of the chain, so we're hoping that that has somewhere around a 1 meg input impedance, but not necessarily looking at some of these pedals. But on the flip side, you can't really see it here, but we have two SUHR output buffers there for the left and right for the stereo, so we do have that at the end, which is a good thing. But let's take a look at what we got. So loop 1, as soon as we come in, we're actually going immediately to the D.A.M, as we talked about. Then loop 2, going to the POG. Now I did do a little mod here on the POG, as you can see, because we didn't have enough room for the input to sit on the other side. So I added an input on this side so that we were able to still get everything wired in place. Loop 3, we have the old school boutique Bjorn Yule pine green compressor. Loop 4, we have the SHO super hard on from ZVEX. Loop 5, got the trusty KLON CENTAUR. Loop 6, vintage TS808 tube screamer. Loop 7, Shin-ei Vibe 2, so this is like the Vibro Mini. Then loop 8, we got our volume pedal from HILTON with the tuner out used out of it. And then loop 9, Cusack Tap Whirl. And then we're going to go up top for loop 10, which is the Deluxe Memory Man. Now one other thing that's happening here that we should talk about is out of this I also have what you can see is a dry output. And you have a switch for the dry amp, which I've enabled for when it's on. Originally it was a tuner mute, but it's going to send to the dry amp all the time. So if you want an amp to reamp with, or you want something that just has the dry signal straight off the input from the guitar, you can utilize that here. The other thing I did is I put a send and return here in the interface, and this is basically going between the first loop set of loops, which is first set of 5, and the second set. So you can plug something in off the board as an audition box, if you will, and if you don't plug anything in, it just normalizes. These last 2 jacks, any pedal you want, it will sit between loops 1 through 5 and 6 through 10. After the looper, we got a couple of different pedals. We got the STRYMON Timeline, STRYMON BLUESKY, and then the Boss RV5. Both those come back to 2 SUHR buffers that are sitting underneath the pine green compressor, which have the options for isolated outputs or normal outputs, and then there's little switches in here to control the polarity of each one of those. Now for the moment of truth, let's see how much this thing weighs. What are we talking about? So you've seen this board, it looks great. The coolest thing about our boards, as I've said in other videos, is that by having this hinge riser, it allows you to double the surface area of any part that the riser covers. So for basically 3/4 of this pedal board, we're able to duplicate space, being able to build up, adding extra rows of pedals so that we're able to fit more pedals on a smaller space. This is 29 by 15, which means it'll fit in a number of the Pelican Air cases, SKB and Gator cases, which are all compatible with any of the flight restrictions from the ATA, from TSA, and any of the international flight regulations that typically permit you to allow 55 pounds in the case for any one of these pedal boards. This right now is sitting just over 25 pounds. In most of these cases that it fits in don't weigh over 10, so we're still well below the travel restrictions, even in the case, so that's a pretty cool thing. But enough about that. Let's see how this actually sounds. Now, this is using a true bypass looper instead of a MIDI programmable switcher, which a lot of the boards this size would include. I think in this particular case, because the player is going to be kind of engaging these things to order the things that he wants and using it in a studio and things like that, it doesn't really need to be programmable. And so we're going to kind of compare sonically how this sounds in bypass, making sure that it really sounds as good as any of the MIDI programmable true bypass switchers that are out there. I think it will, and go from there. Let's see what we got. Well, I would say that rig sounded pretty dang good. I was very impressed with a lot of the pedals on there. Of course, the KLON, how can you not be impressed by that? Sounds great. The vintage tube screamer really did it. Sounds incredible. Loved all the old school stuff like the Deluxe Memory Man on there. Really has the true tape echo vibe. Those were marketed as tape echo replacements back in the day. And you could really hear it with that really hard first repeat. Really, really love this rig. Now, one thing that I want to talk about before we finish up is really the benefits and when you might want to use something like a true bypass looper instead of a MIDI programmable switcher. We've done another episode where we touch on this briefly, but really one of the big distinctions to me is not so much in terms of the sonic difference between a MIDI programmable switcher and a true bypass looper. Really, these are pretty indistinguishable no matter what you're doing in terms of the sonic difference with both of them completely in bypass. They really clean up the signal path well and really abbreviate the amount of pedals that are in the signal chain at any time, going from the guitar directly to the amplifier with everything in bypass. Now, the real advantage, as you probably know, is you can bring in multiple pedals in one foot switch on a MIDI controllable pedal board. Whereas on this one, you have to step on each individual pedal just like you would be stepping on it on the pedal itself, except it's all isolated through this loop strip, and you're bringing in the pedals that way. As I've said many times before, there are always advantages of using a MIDI programmable switcher versus a true bypass looper. I think the biggest one is if you're playing live and you need to be able to program a set list where you're making really definite changes that are repeatable throughout the course of a set. Now this, for example, would be like if you play cover tunes or you play in a worship team and you have predictable sounds that you're going to be calling up each and every time. I can see where the real benefit is in that. But for a lot of guys that are in the studio, for a lot of guys that are playing in their homes and they want to have all the sonic benefits of a switcher by being able to consolidate their signal path with everything in bypass, but they're just bringing in things, you know, a la carte, things that they want to try out and check out different sounds. There's not a whole lot of advantage of going with a MIDI programmable switcher. It does require a lot more in terms of your programming knowledge. It does require some knowledge of MIDI, and I find that a lot of players that actually are requesting MIDI programmable switchers and they're asking us questions through email really don't have a lot of experience with either of those things, with programming or with MIDI, but they see people using it and they believe that that's going to be something that they need too. I would actually highly recommend, if you're that latter person, the person that doesn't know about programming or MIDI, I think you'd be better off just going with a true bypass looper. It's simple, allows you to call up your stuff immediately once you hit one foot switch, but it consolidates the signal path instead of having all the pedals in series. Put a really good high quality input and output buffer like the Mesa Boogie Highwire or some of the other ones I've mentioned, and you're going to have pretty great tone and pretty close to as directly into your amp with a 10-foot cable is going to be in terms of a comparison point. So some thoughts to consider, some food for thought, as they say, when you're considering whether you might want to go this direction like we did on this board with the true bypass looper, or if you want to go with something that's more MIDI programmable, like one of the last rigs that we did with the RJM PBC-10. Now, before we finish up today, I want to invite everybody who is not already subscribed to subscribe. If you want to get the newest, latest, and greatest content, you definitely want to make sure you hit the bell icon as well. That's just going to notify you every time we come out with new stuff. Another thing that I wanted to let you know about, if you're not aware of it already, we have a podcast that's available on all the big podcatchers, iTunes, Spotify, etc. We also have a Patreon page where we do in-depth coaching, offer one-on-one services through email, Skype, Zoom, lots of different options, and even just a really inexpensive $5 level where we do a weekly live stream Q&A that's private for all of our Patreons. And if you can't afford any level of our Patreon, just send us an email and we'll grant you a free account, no questions asked, no means testing required. Another thing I wanted to let you know about is a couple weeks ago, we did a really cool video with Justin Derrico where we shot out different instrument cables. And at the time, the winner of that instrument cable challenge was the Belden 9778. I'm happy to report that we now actually are starting to make Belden 9778 cables. We're using shorting Switchcraft 181 ends, and then either a straight 280 from Switchcraft or a 226, which is the right angle. These sound incredible. They come in 3 different lengths, so you can get them in 10, 15, or 20, and you can get them with a straight to right or a straight to straight, depending on what you want. So check out our Reverb page. We have them all listed up there, and you can purchase them right from us. We try to keep it as reasonable as possible. I'm basically profiting about 10 bucks a cable to kind of give you an idea of the profit margin on this thing. So I try to keep it really reasonable, using really high quality stuff. and the Switchcraft ends are the most reliable, especially for the shorting comparatively to Neutrik. I'm sure some of you might be asking why we're not using Neutrik. For the shorting end, it definitely is the Switchcraft one, which is better, and it's also a little bit more serviceable if it does start to break down. Those Neutriks, once you start having to hit them with contact cleaner, their days are numbered. They might last 10 more times, maybe 50 if you're lucky, whereas the Switchcraft ones are really bulletproof, and we offer a lifetime guarantee on all the cables. So just so you know that, until next time, I'm Mason Marangella, the Rig Doctor. We'll see you.